Hey, welcome to today's video. I'm Richard Chapo. I'm an internet lawyer down in San Diego, California. And today we're taking a look at new state privacy laws in the United States. So this is intended just as an overview. It's not an in-depth review of each state privacy law because, quite frankly, as you can see down there are quite a few states that are working on these. And a review of each one in depth this would be like a 20-hour video. And nobody in their right mind wants to watch a 20-hour video on state privacy laws. So state privacy in the United States has always been kind of an interesting little area. Quite frankly, from an internet perspective, from an online business perspective, we've referred to the last 20 years as sort of the teenage wasteland years, with apology to the WHO. We haven't seen a lot of state privacy laws. Now, there have been some that have been enacted. And when they were enacted, there was probably a good bit of, table punching and, enthusiasm for enforcement. But of course, money wasn't really allocated for that. So we haven't seen much in the way of enforcement actions. Some, but not a lot. And some of the enforcement actions we have seen haven't really worked out all that well. California, for instance, went after TWA, the airline, and I believe they got their rear end handed to them. So it's been hit and miss, to say the least, at that level. But things are changing. And so what we're seeing in the United States is an interesting evolutionary moment when it comes to privacy law, and we're right in the middle of it. And so in some ways, it's also an excellent opportunity to see the system work to address both legal issues and practical issues. So the impetus for all of this it was, effectively the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which was created in the EU, the European Union, and went into effect on May 25th, 2018. Now, the GDPR is unique in that it presented an entirely new regulatory structure for addressing privacy. And there were really two goals to the GDPR. One was to give people more control over the collection and use of their personal information, and two, to batter the large American tech companies who are using personal information as a monetization strategy, i.e. Facebook, Google, these types of groups. And how effective has the GDPR been? Well, some would say it's been effective. Others would say it's just created quite a few pop-ups on websites that people just automatically click through so they can get to whatever it is they really want to view. You'll have to make your own decision. But as an EU law, what effect did the GDPR have in the United States? Well, people asked myself or most internet lawyers if that meant that there would be a U.S. national privacy law, that Congress would act to follow their European brethren. Most of us probably would have laughed. This being 3 or 4 years ago. And the reason for that is we don't have a general privacy law in the United States. We never have. And there are political reasons for that. But, we just haven't. It hasn't been a point of emphasis. Now, we do have some federal laws on privacy topics that deal with either specific groups of people or specific types of information. So, for instance, we have HIPAA, which deals with health records of consumers and citizens. From an internet perspective, we have the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which addresses how companies can collect information from children under 13 online. But we don't have a general overriding privacy law, and that's unique because most countries, certainly most first world countries, do, as well as economic unions like we see with the EU. But what happened was the GDPR proved to be an impetus for some people at the state level. And in California, we saw the introduction of an initiative called the California Consumer Privacy Act. And in California, we have an initiative system where you can write pretty much any initiative you want. And as long as you can get enough Californians to sign a petition supporting it, you can submit that to the Election Commission here in California, and they will put it on the ballot. And that's what happened in this situation. And through some political wrangling and what have you, it was actually taken off the ballot and just redrafted into a law in California in the summer of 2018, about a month after the GDPR was enacted. And whereas it took the GDPR 4 to 6 years to be negotiated and passed, the California Consumer Privacy Act was passed and drafted and signed and the whole kit and caboodle, if you will, in 7 days. That should probably tell you a lot. So, Interesting. But nonetheless, California came forth with this privacy law. Now, it doesn't go into effect until January 1st, 2020, although a good bit of it's probably not going to go into effect until somewhere closer to the summer of 2020. But it is something to be paying attention to, and it is a concern. Now, what happened once California took that action, as we saw, well, all these other states run to do the same thing. And so you can see the list there. We have a significant number of states have gone ahead and started trying to enact their own privacy laws. Now, some are relatively close to the California Consumer Privacy Act in relation to what they require. Others are completely different. There's some that require an online business to get consent for just about anything under the moon. There are others that require almost no consent. There's some that require cookie pop-ups, some that don't. It's just chaos. There's a lot of different regulatory requirements. And so if these bills all pass and become law in these states, well, it's going to be a mess, certainly for the larger companies. And then, the question is going to be, are there thresholds set, and where are those thresholds set? And by thresholds, I mean, do you have to have a certain amount of traffic or transactions within a state before you have to comply with the law? Now, some of these groups will, if they have thresholds, will set them fairly low. In California with the CCPA, there are 3 thresholds, but one that causes great concern is that if you get 50,000 visitors, unique visitors in a year, from California consumers, from California, people who are located in California, then you must comply with the law. Well, that's only maybe 140 to 150 visitors a day. That's not a big number. And if you run a business, you have an online business, a website, an app, and you're looking at your analytics, that's not a huge number. So there's a great concern. And so what's going to happen here with the new state privacy laws, I think, is pretty predictable. They're going to be trumped. And I don't mean that from the perspective of our president. I just mean that we are at a point where the chaos that would result from each state having its own privacy laws is something that nobody wants. And so we actually have a very unique scenario where privacy advocates and the big American tech companies are all in agreement and telling Congress we need a national privacy law. Now, why would we need a national privacy law? Because if we have a general national privacy law, one that applies to the internet, it will essentially trump each of these state laws through something called the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And in plain English, if the federal government passes a law on a particular subject, a state has a law on that same subject, the federal government law is the appropriate law to follow. The state law is not going to be enforced. It's not enforceable. Courts will throw it out. Now, there could be questions about the scope of each law, but that's the general idea. And sometimes it leads to some conflict. You see that with the marijuana laws in the United States right now, where we have some states that have legalized marijuana and the federal government has not. It's still illegal under federal law, but we haven't seen the federal government move to enforce its supremacy rights there, if you will, move to enforce a lot of the drug war and drug laws that support that. Now, I'm not an expert in the marijuana laws at all, so keep that in mind. But with privacy law, I think that's exactly what we would need. We need a general privacy law, and because pretty much all the parties that are invested in that topic are in agreement that we need one, we should see one here, hopefully in the next year or two. The question, of course, is going to be what's the nature of that law, but that's something that they'll have to work out in Congress and get passed. When do I think we could see this law? Some people are thinking maybe as soon as this fall. Congress has been holding hearings on the topic. I would be a little surprised if it came that quick, but 2020 certainly. Some people are thinking we might have to wait until after the election, but whatever that date is, we should see something here in the next couple of years, and it should be welcomed regardless of what it says, because it'll bring some simplicity and efficiency, if you will, to privacy law in the United States, and will avoid a nightmare where we have 25 states or eventually 50 states all with their own privacy laws that all contain different requirements. Because if that occurs and there's no U.S. national privacy law, then you reach a point where if you try to comply with every state's requirements, when somebody comes to your website, all they're going to see are a bunch of different pop-ups and consent notices and consent requests and God knows what. If you imagine the mattress that you sleep on, there should be a warning label on there. Well, this would be the equivalent of the entire mattress being covered by warning labels. That's kind of where we're headed, and it doesn't make much sense. And so hopefully cooler heads will prevail, and we'll see a national federal law. So anyways, that's it for the new state privacy laws in the United States. If you want to actually read any of these laws, just do a Google search for the particular state plus new privacy law, and you should see the bills pop up. They're either going to be Senate bills or House bills in most of the states. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you had any questions or comments, post them below. I'll be glad to answer them. Thanks for watching. Have yourself a good one.